3 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon. Welcome aboard the post-game show along with Elijah Campbell. I'm Jay Phillips. Thank you so much for being on board with us. Lots to get to on today's program. Big news across the street earlier today. The state of South Carolina's name, image, likeness law, bill passed. It has been sent to the governor. As of yet, I cannot tell you that Governor Henry McMaster has signed the bill that would then turn it into law. I have been told that there will be no hiccups in that process. There was a hiccup this week in it, though, and it was more serious. Elijah and I tried to play it off a bit humorously, as did a few others, but it was actually kind of serious. And for just a little bit yesterday, passage of the NIL law by the state Senate was in some doubt, but they cleared the final hurdle, sent it back to the House this morning. The House gave it its final approval. They had already basically approved it, and it is now in the hands of the governor and will become law soon. I will tell you real quick on that, and then we'll get into a few other things. I'll have more detail on this. Jon Blau, who primarily covers Clemson for the Post and Courier, but John was at the State House this week covering this story. For the PNC. I have spoken with a couple of folks at Carolina that know what they're doing or know what they're talking about.
Well-informed people.
Is that the better way to say it? Thank you. That came out poorly. I apologize.
Live radio.
That they are ready to go. What that means exactly, I don't know. Didn't get into a lot of detail with that in a rather brief conversation this morning. I will also tell you, as an addendum to that I reached out to schedule Coach Tanner again here very, very soon. We are working on that. I expect
efforting.
Yes, efforting, industry term. Expect that hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Coach Tanner has been busy with some SEC meetings of late, and we're working on it. So as soon as we can get Coach, and I have put in a request for him to come back in studio. It's been a while. I think when he does, I make him super uncomfortable because I yell at him a lot in like commercial breaks, and he does not like that.
You do nothing but make eye contact.
Yeah.
You don't break it even during the
No, I don't.
breaks.
Yeah. And
Maybe some mouth breathing.
Yeah, it's not. He doesn't like that. It gets awkward. But I do that on purpose. I'm testing him.
Yeah. So actually, don't be surprised if you're watching on our YouTube stream, sponsored by Shepherd's Glass, that you will see him behind the Shepherd's Glass. Here with me. Might have to share this microphone back here because he might be that uncomfortable.
You never know. But we're working on that. But
Scare him.
We'll talk with John at the bottom of the hour about what he was covering. Again, how dicey did it get? Because I'm not kidding. Again, when all is said and done, everything's okay. You're like, okay, whew. But just to remind everybody, the session ends today. There was a possibility that if this thing didn't get sent to the House on time, that this may not have been taken up again until January, and that could have been very detrimental to the public schools in the state of South Carolina that can operate under this umbrella now. And primarily this law is going to do what a lot of other state laws have done. It's going to shield the in-state schools to some degree from punishment by the NCAA should they come after them. But look, we already know now they're not coming after anybody. They're not. Again, the onus is on the NCAA's member institutions to convene and either get rid of these rules or just open it up to allow for what most states are doing. Again, you could kind of do it on your own if you really wanted to. They keep hoping for congressional help. On that note, kids, South Carolina Congressman Russell Fry is one of two to sponsor a new bill in Congress. We're going to have some more on that for you. Very vague on the details, but they say this could offer some protection cover for the NCAA while still also allowing the student athletes to have more of the freedoms that, again, American adults are afforded on a daily basis, and that for decade upon decade, the young American adults that were student athletes were kept from enjoying, which, again, I will point out for those of you who maybe you're new to the show, maybe you're new to this kind of conversation. The NCAA and its member institutions for about the last 70 years were breaking federal law after federal law after federal law. And they've been told now, hey, you've been breaking the law for a long, long time, and it's time for you to stop breaking the law.
I wish it was afforded to me like that. If I break the law, I go to jail.
You know, yeah. I mean,
we can't put the NCAA in jail. It's a lot of people.
No, it is. And, you know, I don't want to see like mascots have to go to jail. They didn't do anything wrong. They'd probably be the representatives.
Yeah, they would have to. They're the representatives of the institutions, the member institutions.
Yeah.
So
and Big Al, the elephant over there in Tuscaloosa.
Oh, it'd be terrible.
Yeah.
Could you imagine how sad Albert the Gator from Florida would be in a jail cell?
That'd be bad.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
So,
except for the UAB Dragon, he can rot in there.
Yeah, or burn the place down.
Yeah, good riddance.
So the South Carolina law is going to provide some cover. It's going to allow schools to begin to take NIL under their own umbrella, which again needs to be done yesterday. So as soon as it can be done, it needs to be done. But I am told, at least from a Carolina perspective, and John can tell us from a Clemson perspective when he joins us, how ready that athletics department is to get going under what protections this law provides. I will say again here, I say this somewhat in jest, tongue-in-cheek, but also with a tinge of seriousness, like I said about the state law in Texas when Ross Bjork, now the AD at Ohio State, but at the time the AD at A&M, was like, hey, we're just trying to comply with the law. And I was like, dude, you and Chris Del Conte in Austin wrote the law. Like, don't hand me this crap. And again,
following orders that I gave myself.
Well, like I said, how do you break the law? That's my only thing. I need an attorney to tell me how you break this law. It seems like the only violator would be the NCAA if they came into South Carolina and attempted to punish Carolina or Clemson, or if the NCAA went to Texas and tried to punish A&M or UT or Texas Tech or whomever, and on I could go with the states that have passed these laws. I don't know how a school within a state's borders that has an NIL law could break the law. That's why I joke about what Ross Bjork said. I'm just trying to comply with the law. Buddy, I don't think it's you that needs to worry about compliance with the law. The law isn't forcing you to do this. The law is allowing you to do it because someone else might violate it. Like, so you're not being compliant with this is not a speed limit here. You must pay athletes X. You must do this. If a school doesn't want to do it, I would think they don't have to, again, like on the interstate, like 70 is the max in South Carolina on most interstates, right? But you got to go what? You got to go 45, don't you? Or 40?
There are some speed minimums.
There's minimums on the interstate. Yeah. Which is weird. Like, wait, I'm going too slow? Yes, you are actually, because you're going to cause a pileup. So again, this is not that. This is not a speed limit kind of thing. This is not a bank robbery kind of thing. And yet there's the law now. But in all seriousness, it does allow schools in South Carolina to take this in-house, and that's where the cover is provided. And quite honestly, like I say, that's something the NCAA needs to just go ahead and acquiesce to. Not pretend that they're just sort of, la, can't hear you. Don't do that. And don't say you're going to continue to fight it. Yes, you have your hat out in Congress. And like I said, I'll try to. There's really this new bill that's being introduced. It's vague on detail. I mean, and it even said in the article I read this morning, Elijah, in Congress, it said that it was basically, and this is my words now, but basically like a gateway bill. So basically, it would just be one bill to then set the stage for another. Well, what are we doing? Just write the damn bill.
That seems kind of counterintuitive to what a law is.
Then debate the bill, pass the bill. I mean,
I mean, that would work in theory, but if you followed through Jon's tweets over the last week, them having a reasonable discussion about this seemed to be more of a chore than a practice, because it was, to say they got off topic a few times would be a little bit of an understatement.
Yeah.
There was probably as much talk about the Cowboys being Satan's team as there were actual elements of this bill.
At least that part was sort of a moment of levity, whereas some other things that got them off topic actually became the topic.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure how that's going to fly. But again, we'll touch on those things for you in just a bit. 4:15 or so this afternoon, our buddy Jack Veltri will join us. Jack's got a good breakdown of the Carolina-Georgia series. Elijah's been doing some deep dives into what the Georgia pitching staff looks like. This is a big one. I know there are some, including our very good friend Derek Scott, a little miffed at the D1 baseball boys for dropping Carolina from the number 10 national seed in their projections last week to number 16 yesterday. David Cloninger spoke with Aaron Fitt, and DC had a good write-up about his conversation with Aaron. And Aaron explains it. I didn't get to listen to their podcast yesterday. We were on remote, and we were just busy beforehand. And I didn't get a chance to listen to the D1 podcast this week as they were debating the merits of the schools that got a hosting opportunity, which Carolina still got. But again, became basically the last team to host, if you will, which means they're going to get the toughest number 2 seed. And in their projection, that was Oregon State. But Aaron said, look, it wasn't that South Carolina did anything wrong. It was that Georgia moved into a hosting opportunity by sweeping Vanderbilt. I forget who Oklahoma beat in the Big 12, but it was a team higher ranked. I mean, look, Carolina was supposed to win the Missouri series, and they did. And on paper, it's not fair per se, and I don't know that Aaron and them said this, but on paper, South Carolina probably should have swept Missouri. Missouri's not very good. But asking a team to go sweep on the road is hard. And Missouri, again, has shown flashes of being an okay team. And they showed one of those flashes on Saturday in their Game 2 win.
And here's why I'm not mad that they dropped South Carolina that far back. The Vanderbilt not being a quad 1 win matters. Now that will vary because, as we know now, Vanderbilt improved their RPI by way of the win against Louisville. So that now is 3 more quad 1 wins.
Yep.
But at the same time, when they're not quad 1 wins, that puts you down below 10. And that's the type of stuff that the committee looks at. They're making a pretty informed decision based off of what the committee looks at, the things they take into account, and that's one of them. And honestly, when Vanderbilt's outside the top 25 in RPI, that sweep doesn't mean as much.
Right.
So then what could be used as a trump card, like a sweep over Vanderbilt, isn't as, I guess, heavy in terms of weight, right? So somebody like, Oklahoma, who might have a comparable sweep to put at the top of their resume, will end up looking a lot better if that remains a quad 1 win. Stuff like that matters, right? And I totally understand when you lose 3 quad 1 wins in a weekend, whether you can control it or not, that still affects what your overall resume is. This is the best 16 resumes in the sport, right? And I can totally understand why you become the 16th best resume when you drop a few Q1s like that, even if it is out of your control. That sucks, but at the same time, Vanderbilt being good is also out of your control. And them being a quad 1 win will also be out of your control if it becomes an even better one. Say they get hot now, right? But you got them when they weren't very good. Also out of your control. But you're looking at the things as they are on paper, which is what you have to do when coming up with projections and formatting a tournament.
And like you and I said yesterday when we saw that later in the show, hey, look, you're still a host. You're still doing enough, and that's your...
With plenty of opportunity.
Yeah.
Plenty of opportunity.
And you've got the number 5 RPI team starting tonight. You've got the number 8 RPI team starting next week. By the way, that number 8 team, Tennessee, is in Nashville this weekend taking on Vanderbilt. Really, y'all, it's kind of funny. I'll leave you with this for just a second here. Only one series doesn't matter this weekend. The 2 last place teams play each other. Every other series, the other 12 schools all have heavy meaning in each of these series this weekend in SEC baseball. We'll get into the NIL stuff for you. Lots of baseball to discuss. A lot of things going on around the NBA, too. It's the Thursday postgame show. 20 minutes after 3 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon. Welcome back into the postgame show. Jay and Elijah with you. Jon Blau of the Post and Courier coming up in just a few minutes, so this will be a shorter segment, so we have more time to talk with John about the state NIL law. It did pass the Senate yesterday, was sent back to the House, who had it first. This was technically a House bill before the Senate took it up. The governor has it. I have not seen as of yet that he has signed it today. I'm not sure when he's signing all the bills that have been passed. Today was the last day of the session, so the governor will be busy. Probably have to get a whole bunch of, fancy pens to hand out for special bills and things they do.
Yeah, it's not National Signing Day, but it'll be Henry's signing.
Yeah, yes,
it's
the governor.
It's a different type of signing day.
That's right. Do some hand exercises there,
He's getting one of those little stress balls.
Squeezy balls, stress balls, yep. So we'll have that for you with John coming up in a minute. I want Elijah to go ahead and jump to today's poll question, because yesterday we had news hit us from a national perspective that we were not prepared for. Despite what only one listener, I want to say, but the one listener he tried real hard to get under our skin, and then we never heard from him again because I guess he realized he failed. But it had to do with LaNorris Sellers. And yesterday, Cody Belair, who is a national analyst for On3, has worked with football programs in the SEC and across the state of Texas.
In personnel. So
yes, in personnel.
Scouting is kind of his thing.
Yes. He said yesterday on the Andy Staples show that when they were discussing South Carolina's upcoming football season, he stunned Andy. I imagine he stunned the bulk of the audience, and Andy's got a pretty good audience. I know he stunned yours truly. I was on the treadmill while I was listening to this. As I was huffing and puffing, I called Elijah, said, "You got to get this sound right now."
Yes.
True story. Back me up.
Yep, it happened. I could almost hear the sweat dripping on the phone.
Thank you. I tried not to short it out.
Gross.
Cody said, "Do you want to just play it?"
Yeah. We actually still have that.
Good.
Let's see. I'm trying to find
I know it was yesterday's cut 13. I remember.
It's today's cut 19.
Look at that.
Andy, this might be my hottest take of the season, but I think we're looking at a LaNorris Sellers dark horse sort of Heisman caliber.
Whoa.
We are so high on him at On3, right? Like we believed in the talent. We saw the physical makeup, the athletic ability, the arm talent, the ability to push the ball vertically, even if they don't have some of the pieces back there. I will say they did bring in Raheem Sanders to carry the load at running back, which is extremely helpful.
Absolutely.
I think that two-headed monster in that backfield is going to be scary, scary. And I think they know what they have in a guy like Nicholas Harbor, right? If those three guys are the only ones that touch the ball on this offense, I'm okay. Because I believe that LaNorris Sellers is going to be so much of a game changer. They were raving about him even before he took a snap of spring. This is somebody that they were saying, oh my gosh, this kid though with the rec specs is an absolute dude back here.
So there you go. Again, that's Cody Belair, national college football / scouting analyst for On3. I believe he's based in Texas. Saying that about LaNorris Sellers of Florence, South Carolina, yesterday on the Andy Staples show. Make of it what you will. And that's what I basically told Elijah. I was like, hey, I don't even know what to think of it. Like I said to Elijah, if you had come to me, because I wasn't thinking this, and I don't mean about the Heisman dark horse thing, which I grant is
lofty.
Yeah. But if you had, let's say Cody Belair had gone on Andy Staples and said, Andy, I could see LaNorris making a real push for third team all SEC. I might have called Elijah and gone, dude, you need to pull this audio.
He dropped the H-bomb.
Because there's 16 quarterbacks in the conference now, and you look at Beck and Dart and a few others. There's some good ones.
Mm-hmm. Quinn Ewers is coming into the conference now.
Yeah. There's some good ones. The
Iamaleava, very close.
Are you sure that's how it's pronounced? I'm sure you are. I'm just
90%.
See, yeah. I'm not sure you're not.
I'm basing it off of one broadcast that I watched in which he actually played.
Iamaleava. At least I know that you're not making that one up. like when Pearson made up Pascal Siakam, which I
Yes.
still don't know if that's a real player.
Who definitely played all night for the Pacers last night. Yes.
No, he's
Pascal Siakam.
he is actually very good.
Rocco Wallace is not real.
No,
Pascal
that's
Siakam
unfortunate.
is. Yeah.
Rasheed Wallace was real.
Very real.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, again, now Elijah has a poll question based on that audio you just heard from Cody Belair, National Scouting Analyst for On3.
It inspired us. So at 107.5 The Game, our poll question of the day. On3's Cody Belair sees Gamecocks QB LaNorris Sellers as a potential Heisman caliber dark horse candidate. What are your expectations for him? 1, pump the brakes, 0 clue. 2, top 8 quarterback in the SEC, which put him in the top half. So not third team all SEC, but being in the top half. 3, good enough to go bowling, get that elusive 6 win. And then lastly, serious breakout season, which could include something like being mentioned in the Heisman discussion or being third team all SEC or, heaven forbid, second or first.
Right.
Serious breakout season. As of right now, and it's pretty even, 31% say pump the brakes, 0 clue. 29.1% say good enough to go bowling. 21.5% say serious breakout season. And the last one is top 8 quarterback in the SEC. That is at 17.9%. So slightly, the majority slightly, say, let's pump the brakes, 0 clue exactly how good he is. So I have no idea to be able to get an expectation from somebody that I've never seen play meaningful snaps. But 29% saying good enough to go bowling. I feel like it's pretty reasonable expectation.
That's pretty close.
Is a fair expectation.
Yeah, and no super, there's no majority, obviously. And even the last place finisher for now is at 18%. So that's a decent chunk of folks who think top half of the league. We had one guy, Jimmy, hit us and said, just let him play. Why do there have to be expectations? Well, dude, there have to be expectations.
That's not how that works. Sorry, Jimmy.
I mean, everything in life has expectations, and I'm not taking a shot at you, Jimmy, but I mean, you have to have expectations. You can't just say, I don't know, we'll just see. I mean, because if you don't set some goal, or even the bare minimum, whatever that might be, between Shane and Dowell and LaNorris himself, then what are we doing? I mean,
they're just accepting results for whatever it is.
Yeah, you can't. So there have to be expectations. How lofty? I don't know. And again, this shocked the hell out of me yesterday. I'll just say that's why. I mean, again, not a lot shocks me, but that did. That did. And again, it came from a national analyst a few states over who does this for a living and evaluates kids all across the country on a daily basis. So it's just something to think about. That's all. It's just something to think about. All right, come back on the other side. LaNorris will probably be getting some good NIL opportunities. He would have anyway. Now he may get better ones because of a new state law that has passed. Jon Blau of the Post and Courier covering the news this week as the legislature put a final stamp on it. We'll talk to John about what it means for the state of South Carolina's athletic departments when the postgame show continues. We are talking Gamecock football a second ago. Now we are going to talk Gamecocks, Tigers, Chanticleers, Cougars.
It's
Eagles.
all relative now. Yeah.
That's right. The state of South Carolina NIL law has cleared both chambers with final approval from the Senate yesterday and the House this morning on the last day of this year's legislative session. It's in the hands of the governors. Jon Blau on the beat covering primarily the Clemson Tigers for the Post and Courier was here in Columbia covering some of the legislative activity, we shall say. And John had a little fun on Twitter with some of that. Good to have you on, sir. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. Yesterday, and I guess the day before as well, there was a little fun, but Senator Shane Martin of Spartanburg County was quite serious about the gun prohibition, and that led to some pretty serious debate in the Senate. He did not want gun prohibitions in this legislation. Some senators did. The NCAA at the national level does. How dicey, in your opinion, and maybe in the opinion of those you were with this week, how dicey did it get in terms of maybe this bill not seeing final passage?
I don't think it really ever was. I mean, I think it was a priority, obviously, for Clemson, South Carolina, all those schools that they wanted this. I think more so it's just kind of the normal political bluster. I mean, you have to kind of make your points that you believe strongly in. There were a couple senators who are obviously saying they didn't even like the fact that they, were amending this bill, and NIL's gone too far and all that type of stuff. And obviously, Senator Shane Martin, his issue was he wants athletes to be able to promote guns. Obviously, very pro-gun guy. I think everybody was kind of making their points. They were going to do what they felt like they needed to do or wanted to do, and then it passed through the next day. So I don't know. I guess I'm maybe a little cynical about politicians. I just wonder how much of it's, how much is it really going to get derailed, or is it just everybody kind of speaking their piece that they feel like they need to speak?
And there is no gun prohibition, so I suppose in some sense Shane Martin won that one. Now, from what I understand, John, there is language in the amended bill that basically can leave it up to the schools to prohibit their athletes promoting whatever they deem that may go against the school's principles, which could be rather vague. And gosh, I hate to see that end up being litigated too. But am I correct in saying that while there's no gun prohibition, it doesn't mean that, hey, come on, and like one senator said, I don't want the starting quarterback, saying, hey kids, come buy a Glock.
From my understanding, I don't know if I'm understanding this wrong, but I still see the same kind of stipulations in terms of alcohol and, tobacco, adult entertainment, gambling, and then guns and gun ammunition is still in that piece. And so I don't think the state's allowing that. I don't know if he won that fight. I still think it's under that list of things that you're not supposed to do. Maybe there'll be, situations where it might be challenged, but as far as I'm aware, I don't think you're going to be able to do that.
John, a lot of other states have very similar NIL bills, and many are starting to pop up around the country. And I think people look at Missouri's as maybe being the most radical in terms of, benefiting the main school that's in that state pretty well. But how would you maybe say this one might be different than maybe some of the other ones that we've seen pop up in the last few years, or is it even that much different than a lot of the ones that we see get alluded to when talking about NIL and the legislation behind it?
Yeah, as far as this bill, from my understanding, it's basically just bringing this into compliance with what the NCAA has done, in recent weeks. They basically said now that schools can create and facilitate these deals, which allows South Carolina, Clemson to have more people in-house that can get on the phones, call companies, say, hey, do you want to do an NIL deal with this person? It potentially allows I think obviously South Carolina, they had like a marketing agency they wanted to have in-house. They weren't allowed to do that because of NCAA rules before. Now they can kind of have that there. There's the potential of, the collectives themselves almost basically being a part of the fundraising entities. They could come in-house at some point. So, I mean, it's basically, I would say standard in terms of what we've seen around in other states. Everybody just wants to not be limiting their schools more than the NCAA does. The next step, though, is, and I think in Virginia, obviously there's bills that have come up in terms of they're legislating to try to get the athletes paid directly by the schools, which is the next step probably in this process. And who knows if the states themselves are going to be the ones to push this across the finish line, or if it's going to be a settlement in the House case that a lot of people are talking about, or the NCAA themselves actually, kind of creating some kind of framework or a court ruling that the athletes are employees. There's so many different ways this thing could spin. But in terms of South Carolina and what they've done, it's pretty standard. But who knows if it's actually going to – I guess what I'm trying to say, who knows if it's actually going to hold for that long. So everything could change again.
Talking to Jon Blau, the Post and Courier, the state of South Carolina NIL bill passing the House today. That was the final hurdle. They took it up. That was their bill first, then to the Senate, now on to the governor. John, yeah, you gave us sort of a mid to longer term outlook there in terms of the other factors and entities that could weigh in on this. But let's go short term now. Let's focus primarily on Carolina and Clemson's athletics departments. I spoke to someone at Carolina today who says they're ready to go. I didn't get into a lot of detail yet. You covered Clemson. How ready are they to go? And then B, John, what does that mean? How quickly do you believe these schools are going to act to get these things done that this bill allows for?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of ready to go, I'm sure that's in terms of having staff prepared to, like I was saying, reach out to some of these companies to have ideas where, you have your own sponsors like Nike, at Clemson, why am I forgetting Coca-Cola school, right? Isn't South Carolina Pepsi school?
No, Coca-Cola here too, yeah, and Under Armour.
Coca-Cola, okay. Well, never mind. Poor Pepsi. But they can actually reach out to those guys and say, hey, do you want to work with our athletes now? Before the school couldn't get involved, and there could be issues if there were other brands they wanted to work with that conflicted with the school and stuff. And so there's that aspect. The second aspect, which I'm not quite sure how ready everyone is the bringing the collectives in-house part, because there are issues in terms of Title IX compliance. If you were to have your collective, say for Clemson, basically be a part of ICTE, the fundraising arm, you need to be in compliance in terms of how you're using that money, both for male and female athletes. And there's a huge question in terms of, is it about opportunity or is it about how much money is being divvied up? Because obviously a lot of these male sports, those athletes tend to have a higher brand value, quote unquote, which some people might argue is higher pay for play value. But how that works with Title IX, I think there's still some fuzziness. So in terms of figuring that out, I think that there's going to be kind of a little bit of a wait and see to see how that actually unfolds.
Now, clearly, one of the, I guess, the images for me when I think about the bill coming to fruition is, the image of, Dabo and Shane Beamer sitting next to each other and everybody kind of lobbying with each other to try to get this thing passed and get it done. But obviously, Clemson and South Carolina have different, athletic department needs than somebody like Coastal Carolina and Wofford and Furman. And sometimes we talk about this whole discussion of advancement in college athletics. There's different schools that don't get to be, I guess, a part of that conversation. But is this something that can very well positively help those type of schools as well?
Yeah, I mean, it helps certain athletes. At the end of the day, a lot of the big money, obviously, is with the Clemsons and the South Carolinas. And, that's why they've been talking about, even in terms of the greater model, a potential split between big-time college football and the rest of these schools like Coastal Carolina and Furman and some of the others you mentioned. So it can help in terms of local businesses and, playing at your level in terms of kind of equipping some of those athletes to be able to make some money, maybe potentially retain players. But, again, we've seen it a lot. I remember I'm an Eagles fan, and during the NFL draft, they're talking about Quinn Mitchell, the corner, and Nick Saban, obviously just retired from Alabama, said he was our number one guy in the transfer portal. We're trying to get him in. Obviously, they're trying to steal these guys from these smaller schools. That's still going to happen, and obviously with the NIL, the way it's going to be constructed and how much these schools are placing an emphasis on raising it, they're going to be stealing a lot of players from the Coastal Carolinas and the Furmans or whoever's if they see someone worth taking. So it's kind of, the big fish are getting bigger. The small fish are going to do the best they can. But at the end of the day, most of the money, I guess what I'm trying to say, most of the money is still going to be with the athletes that are at Clemson and the South Carolinas and schools of that size.
John, before we let you go, was there any language in this new bill that did indeed make the Dallas Cowboys Satan's team?
I did not see that. I don't think the Catholic diocese is prohibited from working with the Cowboys, even though they're a pro team, and I don't think that really is anything that anybody would. Had anything to do with.
To use a movie term, I guess that's left on the cutting room floor. Although they don't do that anymore in the movies, but they used to back in the day. John, appreciate you, buddy. We'll check in again as with the baseball stuff here, as both these in-state schools look like they're going to be hosting in the NCAAs as long as everything goes the way they want them to. Good stuff. Appreciate you, man.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Jay.
That is Jon Blau, Jon_Blau, BLAU. To follow along on Twitter, and he'll be covering a very big baseball series this weekend. Clemson at Wake Forest.
Those both those teams, pretty good.
Big opportunity for Wake. Clemson, I think they're kind of locked in. Real quick, hit that sounder there. We have time for that, or you want me to just give them away?
We sure do.
Call now for your chance to win tickets to go check out Asia Wilson and the defending champion Las Vegas Aces take on the Puerto Rican national team. Caller number 6 wins from the game.
404-6100 is the number to win those tickets. Caller 6, good luck. 11 minutes in front of 4 o'clock on this Thursday afternoon. Welcome back into the post-game show. Jay Phillips, Elijah Campbell with you. Thanks again to Jon Blau of the Post and Courier for joining us. If you're just tuning in during the commercial break, the state of South Carolina's NIL law had its final passage today. Some interesting debate in the state Senate this week, but not enough to hold anything up. And then the Senate sent it over to the House for final approval this morning after a couple of quick amendments. It's in the hands of the governor. Spoken to some folks at Carolina who say they're ready to go. And we'll get more detail on what that entails in the coming days. But we asked Jon about that. You know, how quickly can you move on some of these things? You know, that remains to be seen. Especially, I think he makes a good point. And it's not something that's going to be lost on these schools today, when he talked about the Title IX compliance, because that's been one of the big points the NCAA leadership has made when discussing this. So again, my opinion here, but the schools, and when I say, I don't just mean Carolina, Clemson, Coastal, Charleston, those are the 4 big state schools with big athletic departments. I don't just mean them. I'm talking the schools coast to coast, border to border. Need to have control of this. If you're going to get blamed, you need to have responsibility. The worst thing I see in life is when somebody takes the blame and they didn't have anything to do with it. I mean, if I may, real quick, since we're talking a little bit of state government, and I know enough about what I'm talking to say this, like there were times in South Carolina when citizens might blame the governor because the governor's the elected leader without understanding how much power the state legislature actually wields in this state, and the governor is powerless to really do anything about whatever it may have been. There's a little more control now from the executive branch in South Carolina, but I remember some folks that used to work back in the day, like, people blame the governor, and, like, the governor has no control over this because they don't let him control it. It'd be some other entity. Anyway,
like a GM for David Tepper.
Right. Right. It's good. It's good. But again, like I said, you go back now. Look, did the University of Florida and some of the folks down there have a little bit of say, Billy Napier at all when it came to the Jaden Rashada thing? Probably some. But did they know that now defunct collective didn't have the $13 million?
That's a pretty big promise that if I'm going to make, I want to at least be sure I can provide a good chunk of it.
But people were like, oh, Florida's so stupid. How'd they let that? And I was like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, if Florida was in control of the NIL collective under their fundraising arm, or their booster club arm, or whatever arm, then they would have known. We don't have $13 million.
They wouldn't have offered $13 million.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. So how ready, to kind of come around to that, how ready are Carolina and Clemson to bring these things in-house in terms of, like, look, the law passes today. This is me being hypothetical. The law passes this morning right across the street. The governor's office is also right across the street. Governor signs it today. Tomorrow morning, they wake up and go, hey, Garnet Trust, you're now under our direct control. I don't think it's that quick, but is it the beginning of June? Is it the end of the fiscal year, later this summer, and the start of the academic year, maybe 1st of August? I don't know. But as soon as they can do it, they need to do it. And that, again, I don't just say that for schools in state. I say that for schools in America.
Nationally.
Yeah. Time for that to happen.
Oh, yeah. And here's the thing, too. Maybe we can end up having rules, at least with some type of disclosure of who's making what, so we can establish a little bit of a market, right? That's kind of the next step.
Yep.
Is to be able to know what everybody's paying for a certain player, and that way, like, players have better negotiating power, and it's not just agents blowing up the phone numbers of coaches saying, hey. So, there's a piece in The Athletic today, Kyle Tucker talking about the market for players in the basketball transfer portal. And there are some agents who will call coaches and be like, yep, starting, we have 4 offers of $750,000. And they don't got 4 offers of $750,000. It's a lot of smoke, but they can't fact check them on that. So with establishing a certain market will also help with the amount of transfers that happen because we don't have enough knowledge to establish a real market. That's kind of the next step in this, right? Is to be able to have some type of transparency to where we can rein in everything a whole lot easier than we have the last 3 years.
And the state of South Carolina law, if I'm not mistaken, does allow for a lot of these deals to remain private. And I on the one hand, I can appreciate the want of that, but I'm more in line with what you just said.
How badly do you want to rein this in?
Yeah.
And if you want to rein it in badly, you kind of have to do it.
A free market has to have, a large level of transparency. And we can kind of get into that whole ACC FSU thing. Disney doesn't maybe want you to see all the fine print in the contract, but they don't mind letting you know how much they're paying for it. Right?
Correct.
So there's that. We'll talk a lot of baseball next hour. Keep it